that too loud?
No. All right, gang. Welcome once again to the weekly Mac Forum video chat. It's the October 9th edition. Excuse the noise. I was a little bit late moving some equipment around. So we're rolling right along here. Bad day for football for me. Both the Lions and the Cowboys lost. So would you excuse me if I was a little distracted before the show started there. Let's go ahead and dive right into what's been going on in the forum this week. First of all, I want to point something out. We've discussed this before, but perhaps not in quite these terms. If you, let's say you have an email recipient that you've sent mail to in the past, and you no longer send to that person, or the email address is no longer accurate. I've showed you in the past how to remove recipients from within mail. Let's assume you've done that already. Well, and now when you go to send an email, if you start typing that person's name or something similar, it will show up in, the old address that you thought you had deleted will still show up in the possible list of recipients for you to autofill. That's probably because the old email address is still in your contacts. And so the solution to that is to go into contacts and either delete the contact card if you no longer interact with that individual or that company, or clear all of the email addresses. As long as there is an email address in your contact book on your phone or on your Mac, as long as there is an email address there, mail will try to pick up that address as a prospective email address. It's designed to cut down on the number of times you have to type an email address, but there are times when it comes in as more of a hindrance than a help. So if you're experiencing this issue where you thought you had deleted an old address, but the the mail program rather, is still filling it in, check in contacts. Go to the contact card for that person or that company and get rid of any email addresses that are there. Once all the email addresses for that contact are cleared, that problem should go away. That's something that I'm not sure we covered when I dealt with this tip previously. And thanks once again to Forum Administrator Chaskag, aka Charlie, for that one. All right. As you may see from this thread, we've got an ongoing thread in the forum, and we've actually got a couple of threads. Some of the posts have been merged into one thread, but there are a few threads with questions about the High Sierra upgrade. And this thread is continuing with tips and tricks that people have noticed as regards getting rid of issues with High Sierra. Member Randy B. Singer added to the thread, and I want to point out two things that he noticed. Randy keeps pretty good tabs on these kinds of issues. And one of the things that he seems to have noticed is, first of all, some folks with non-Apple SSDs, in other words, these are third-party SSDs, have had problems with High Sierra, and it seems to be a need for a firmware update. Some of those manufacturers are working with Apple to figure out a fix. If you've got a third-party SSD and you haven't already upgraded to High Sierra, you might want to wait a little bit, because if I'm not mistaken, that conversion to the APFS file system occurs automatically with SSDs. So you might want to hold off on that. And also, Randy reiterates something that I've said a couple of times on the show. If you are one to keep using various disk utilities, make sure that the utility that you are using has been upgraded to cover High Sierra. In the past, I've mentioned this. You don't generally want to use a utility on disk. Let's say you have Sierra and the utility that you have hasn't been cleared for Sierra. It's only been cleared for El Capitan. You don't generally want to use those, as that can lead to issues. Now, in a normal update cycle, the problems might be minor depending on what got moved around. In this case, with the update to High Sierra, I think it's pretty safe to say that if you use an older utility on an APFS formatted disk, then that your odds of having a problem go up exponentially. APFS is a completely different file system. It's a major restructuring of the way the Mac stores, catalogs, and tracks files. So you don't want to use. I've got some utilities on my drive that I'm not using at the moment. A couple of them I've updated. I'll use those, but there are some that I haven't updated, and I'm debating. I'm holding off on updating those until I decide what to do. I'm looking at APFS. I'm running APFS right now, but as you know, in the initial release of High Sierra, Fusion Drive, which is my setup, is not completely supported. So I'm kind of got all of that in a holding pattern, but Randy's thoughts about using a clean installation in this case, and also using utilities that are already cleared for APFS, those thoughts still hold, and I think they're a good one to hold on to and heed. That's going to be an ongoing thread for a while, I think, so you might want to check it routinely. All right, next one. This is a post I want to mention. Member Sandman noticed recently that iTunes 12.7 no longer has apps listed in it. And that's because if you've been following the show, you know this, but not everybody on the forum has caught this. As of iTunes 12.7, application management or for iOS devices has been moved to the device itself. You download new apps on the device, on the iOS device. You update apps on the iOS device. And when you do update your device, if you then sync back to your Mac, those apps are not, I repeat, not mirrored back to your drive. So to your iTunes library. I'm going to show you. Now the library is still there. Let me give you a real quick heads up with that. If you could, I'll show you in just a second here. I'm getting my iTunes library up. I had forgotten that I had to pull this up. As you can see, all of my older apps that are there. What's not there are some apps that I updated within the last week because they were updated on the device. And so when you sync back with iTunes, right now, those new apps and new updates are not passed back to your Mac. So you need to be aware of that. There are some third-party pieces of software that I think may step in on this, but right now they don't generally make it easy to do that function that iTunes had. So keep that in mind as you're going through your your decisions about what to upgrade, when to upgrade, etc., etc., etc. As I say, iTunes 12.7 does not have application management in there anymore. And I'll show you that in just a minute because I have an iTunes little tip that I want to demo for you a little bit later in the show. All right, next one. This is something that came up. I'm going to go back to the top of this thread so you can see what it's about. Within the process of the Sierra update, some users have found that their document folder, okay, which used to be on their hard drive, has now been moved to iCloud. Okay, and I'll tell you the fix for that in just a second, but I want to say the first thing to do anytime you're doing an upgrade, whether you're talking Mac, PC, whatever, when you're doing a major update like an operating system update, you don't just want to speed click through those notification screens. I know I've been guilty of that. Hey, I've done it before and it's come back to bite me in the behind, okay? This is one that in some ways, if you're not very careful, could come back and bite you. It's not impossible to recover from, but it's a bit of a surprise if you're not aware that it's going to happen. Check your settings. As you're reading through the screens, try to determine if it's going to move because it usually warns you about that. Okay? So read those dialogues during installation and make sure that you follow what's going on. Now, here is the fix for that. Charlie, once again, came to the rescue with a procedure that should work. And member ETAF tried it, and it seems to work, okay? And here, so let's assume that your document folder has been moved, your document and desktop folders have been moved to iCloud, and you don't want that, okay? Here's how you fix it. You can generally fix it, okay? But you have to be careful how you do it. The first thing you want to do is find those folders that you want back on your Mac and copy them to your Mac's drive. Do not copy them to a folder that you may name downloads or to your desktop folder because those folders are going to be overwritten in a later step in this process. Find someplace convenient, create a folder, on your drive, name it whatever you want, find a convenient place for it, copy the files to there. When that's done, you want to go into and turn off iCloud Drive. This is important. Turn off iCloud Drive. Now, the Mac will automatically add desktop and documents folders back to your Mac. That's why you didn't want to put these things in folders called desktop and documents. The folders that the Mac recreates are probably going to be empty. Now all you got to do is move those files that you copied back to their correct locations. Anything that you want on the desktop, put in the desktop folder. Anything that you want in the documents, put in the documents folder. But as I say, you want to copy those files to a easy to find location. Then you're going to want to turn off iCloud Drive. And then after the Mac creates those two folders, now you can drag and drop, copy your content back to where it should be. All right, and that should get you back up and running. Now, finally, we're leading to a forum discussion that should lead right into one of the tips that I have tonight. Rod Sprague. Rod's been coming through with a lot of good information lately. Really cuts down on my prep time for the show when members like Rod keep finding this interesting information. A lot of times you'll notice I do try to give credit where credit is due when I pick up a tip from a user. And Rod's tip has to do with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth buttons on your iPhone under iOS 11 do not necessarily behave the way that people expect them to behave. Okay? And I'm going to demo that for you in just a half a second here. This apparently has caused a lot of confusion. In the thread is a link to an article from OSX Daily that describes this behavior. And I have the link to both thread and the article for you. Let me show you what Rod means when he says the buttons do not behave the way you expect them. And I don't know who created this little situation or who thought this was a good idea, but it's probably not a good idea. All right, if I swipe up from the bottom of my phone to get to Control Center, okay? Now, when I touch the Wi-Fi signal, for example, you expect it to disconnect, okay? You would expect it to turn off Wi-Fi. Watch what happens. I touch it, and it says not connected, but that's not the same thing as being off. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you just real quickly here. I'm looking at the Wi-Fi on my phone. Notice that it does not say off. Okay, it says not connected. When I turn it off, it actually will say off. So if you just use that Control Center button, it doesn't turn everything off. If you want it completely off, you've got to do that manually right now. Okay, the same thing holds true for Bluetooth. And earlier when let me just back up to where I was. And I'll show you something else that I noticed earlier. Earlier when I did this, now you see there, it gave me a little very quick warning that said disconnected from Gemini. That's a wireless network. So it just disconnected. It didn't completely turn things off. I have an indicator here for Bluetooth as well, and the same behavior occurs. Bluetooth. Now, if I short press, I just have these few little indications here, these four little things. But if I press and hold in that area, now I get a few more options. I can turn airplane mode on and off, personal hotspot. I'm going to go ahead and go back and see if it will reconnect me on. But as you can see, that's part of the problem. Now, that long press that I was telling you about is simply a matter of pressing. When I bring up the Control Center, it's pressing and holding for a second, and now I get more options. So that's one indication of something that does not exactly behave the way that you would expect it to. If you touch some of these other options and hold for a second, in other words, what's sometimes referred to as a long press, you get other options. So for example, if I long press the camera, I get options for taking selfie, recording video, slow-mo, etc. That's a real quick one. I haven't checked the flashlight. That one doesn't seem to have any extra options. But as you can see, some things in here do not behave the way that we expect them to. Now, for the other tip that I want to show you tonight, relative to iPhones and iOS devices, I'm going to need to open up iTunes, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to my music library. All right, and I want to show you something. As you can see right now, I don't have, this was some stuff that was on there recently, but is not on there at the moment. Okay, as you can see, I'm going to go over to my phone here on the side. And as you can see in music right now, I don't have anything on my iPhone. Okay, I don't have any music set up to play on my iPhone right now that I've moved from the library. So let me show you a little quick trick that I picked up recently. I'm going to go back into album mode, like I'm going to view an album, okay? I'm going to scroll down just for the heck of it because I know what I want to put on here just for a demo. I'm going to go down, I'm going to find my B.B. King, an album that he did with Eric Clapton called Deuces Wild. As you can see, that wasn't on my phone, and you can see that's true. Now here's my B.B. King stuff. As you can see, I have quite a bit. Now, you would think a lot of actions in iTunes and in other programs you get to by accessing via right click. I'm going to get some of these things out of our way here. All right, now you would think that iTunes, let's bring that back up because it seems to have lost our connection. You would think that when you do this, okay, you would think that it would be easy to push something over. Okay, looks like Safari is being a little bit of an annoyance here, so I'm going to change my screen share option and have it show desktop. There we go. All right, now you would think that you could simply right-click here and choose to put it on the device. Okay, you can't do that. Can't do that way. But if I open this file, if I open this and so I can expand it and see the tracks, now when I click on a track, one of my options is I can send it to, it says add to the device, add to iPhone. Now, what if I want to move that entire album in one shot? I don't have to do it song by song. I can select all. Once I've selected the first track, I can select all. And now I have the option add to device. Okay. And now, lo and behold, let's go to, I've just checked on my phone. As you can see, that quickly, that album has been added to my phone. Okay. And we'll see if you can hear this. I'm going to get rid of the amazing thing that's running in the background here. Didn't want that to pop up. But as you can see, that's a quick way to push things over to the iPhone, sometimes to push your content over to the iPhone. And everything's, I'm getting a malfunctioning cable warning here. That seems to be not a cable issue for me. It's one of two things. It's either the cable is malfunctioning, or in some cases, I think I've just got a bad connection on this hub that I'm using. So I may have to deactivate that port. But as you can see, if I start playing this, you can see it's on the phone now. I just activated it on my phone. And now it's there, and I can move it as I need to. But that's a quick and dirty way to push something over to the phone. And as you can see, that song is being played there, as you can see in the background. So that's a good, quick way to push something over to the iPhone. We saw the tip about Control Center. And it doesn't, I like this as a quick way to push something over to the iPhone. It may not be my method of choice all the time, but it is something that I would use once in a while to kind of help things along. And the change with 12.7, taking out app management and a few other functions, is forcing all of us to rethink the way that we deal with certain types of content on our phone. It still handles playback of media fine. It's just some of the application management that people are missing. I have no doubt that in a short amount of time, given all the hue and cry that you hear on the internet, in a short amount of time, you're going to see either Apple release a utility that deals with application management, or that some of these third-party programs are going to add a few more application management features. One feature, some of them already have some application management in them. One feature that you don't have, though, for example, I have two programs that I've tried to use to pull content off of my Mac or off of my iPhone and onto my Mac for backup purposes. And they work fine. The thing that I'm discovering, though, is this. What I don't have right now is a way to access the App Store in iTunes, in iOS, unless I do it on the device. I was on a website yesterday reading a description of a piece of software that I might try. It was free. It was one of these vocabulary apps that, you know, test your knowledge of vocabulary. I use things like that with my students sometimes. And I decided I was going to try this particular app. And I clicked on the link in the web page. I was on my Mac at the time. I clicked on the link in the web page, and it opened up a page like it would have in the iOS store in the past. But that doesn't get the app on my device. So what I'm going to have to do now is go and track down the app, which I can do, but I'm going to have to do it on my phone or on my iPad. Can't do it on my Mac. And that's a minor inconvenience at times, in the sense that under the old system, I didn't have to download something multiple times on multiple devices and things like that. But it also meant that if I was surfing the net and I discovered an app, I'm on my Mac and I discover an app that looks promising, I could go get it on the Mac. I didn't have to launch my device, go get my iOS device, launch the browser, go to the App Store and get the program. I didn't have to do all of that. So I'm sure that someone will take some steps to deal with management of these kinds of issues. So that's going to just about do it for this week's tips, guys. Sorry for that one little rocky point there where things kind of skitzed out. If I have some time tomorrow, I may be able to fix that and edit it a little bit. But in the meantime, it's only mildly embarrassing. You guys know that I screw up from time to time, so shouldn't be that big an issue. The information's still good. As usual, a lot of the information for each show comes from questions from forum members or from tips. So if you've been lurking and you've got a question you want to ask, don't try to post it in the Contact Us forum. Go ahead and become a member. It doesn't cost you anything. And then post your question. And with any luck, you might see your question on a future broadcast. Until next week, I've enjoyed bringing this information to you. This is your host, Sylvester Rock, a.k.a. Sly Dude. Thank you for letting me into your Mac this week. And I'll see you in the forum during the week and next week on the forum video chat. Thanks for joining me, folks.